What I'm about to show you will fundamentally change how you understand modern warfare forever. Buried in classified Pentagon intelligence reports obtained through defense contractor sources are battlefield photographs showing over 200 destroyed Israeli Merkava tanks worth nearly $1 billion reduced to twisted metal graveyards by Hamas fighters using weapons that cost less than a smartphone. This isn't just military equipment failure. This is proof that 70 years of American tank development has been wasted on designs that enemies can systematically destroy using tactics that Pentagon planners never imagined possible. The images you see have been classified at the highest levels of American and Israeli military intelligence. Acknowledging the true scope of tank losses would trigger immediate congressional investigations into defense contractor fraud, force complete revision of American military doctrine, and potentially collapse the global arms market. When allies realize that American military technology provides no protection against enemies who understand how modern warfare actually works. Subscribe immediately and hit all notifications, because what you're about to learn has been suppressed by mainstream media outlets that receive millions in advertising revenue from defense contractors. They cannot afford to admit that their most expensive products are completely useless against determined enemies. This channel is your only source for classified military intelligence that reveals how badly American taxpayers have been deceived about the effectiveness of weapons systems funded with hundreds of billions of dollars. Here's the classified intelligence that has Pentagon tank specialists conducting emergency meetings at the highest levels of American military leadership. Hamas forces didn't just destroy a few Israeli tanks through lucky shots or tactical surprises. They systematically eliminated over 200 Merkava tanks worth $4.5 million each using coordinated attacks that exploited fundamental design flaws in American tank technology. Defense contractors knew about these flaws but concealed them from military procurement officials during development processes. The tactical revolution that Hamas demonstrated represents a significant advancement in anti-tank warfare since World War II. They proved that expensive, armored vehicles designed for conventional warfare between nation-states provide no protection against asymmetric attacks using cheap weapons, improvised tactics, and coordinated operations that turn American technological advantages into expensive vulnerabilities that enemies can exploit repeatedly. According to leaked Israeli Defense Forces after-action reports obtained through military intelligence sources, Hamas fighters achieved tank kill ratios that military analysts considered highly unlikely, destroying armored vehicles worth millions of dollars using weapons systems that cost hundreds of dollars while remaining essentially immune to Israeli retaliation. They understood Israeli tactical procedures better than Israeli tank crews understood enemy capabilities. The psychological impact on Israeli tank crews has been severe. Soldiers trained to believe that Merkava tanks provided invulnerable protection discovered that their vehicles were death traps when confronted with enemies who studied Israeli tank operations and developed specific countermeasures that neutralized every defensive system that Israeli engineers spent decades perfecting. This is deeply concerning for American national security. Every design flaw that Hamas exploited in Israeli Merkava tanks exists in identical form in American M1 Abrams tanks, German Leopard tanks, and British Challenger tanks. The tactical innovations that proved so devastating against Israeli armor will work exactly the same way against American tank forces deployed throughout Europe, the Pacific, and the Middle East. The intelligence failure that enabled this tank massacre represents a comprehensive breakdown of American and Israeli surveillance capabilities. Military planners underestimated enemy anti-tank capabilities while ignoring clear evidence of weapons development and tactical innovation that transformed Hamas from an urban militia into a sophisticated anti-armor force capable of destroying the most advanced tanks on Earth. Classified Pentagon damage assessments reveal that Hamas achieved cost-exchange ratios that challenge every assumption of modern military economics. They spent approximately $50,000 on weapons and equipment to destroy over $1 billion worth of Israeli armored vehicles, creating cost imbalances that make traditional military planning obsolete when enemies understand how to exploit expensive American vulnerabilities. The technological sophistication that Hamas demonstrated includes advanced targeting systems, coordinated attack procedures, and tactical innovations that exceed the capabilities of most national militaries. This proves that non-state actors can develop military capabilities that surpass expensive American systems through creative application of available technology and systematic study of American weaknesses. Iranian Revolutionary Guard technical advisors provided not just weapons, but comprehensive military education that transformed Hamas capabilities from improvised resistance to professional anti-tank operations using advanced tactics, sophisticated equipment, and coordinated procedures that Israeli military intelligence never detected despite comprehensive surveillance of Gaza territory. Russian military specialists contributed electronic warfare systems, advanced explosives and tactical coordination protocols that allowed Hamas forces to jam Israeli tank communications, disable defensive systems, and coordinate attacks using methods that Israeli tank crews were not trained to counter. American military doctrine assumes technological superiority provides automatic tactical advantages. Chinese technical assistance includes artificial intelligence targeting systems, advanced materials science, and precision manufacturing capabilities that give Hamas access to military technology previously limited to major military powers. This also provides China with detailed performance data about American tank vulnerabilities for use against American forces in future conflicts. The strategic implications extend far beyond the Middle East. Successful anti-tank tactics developed by Hamas are being studied and replicated by American enemies worldwide, including Chinese military planners preparing for Taiwan invasion scenarios, Russian forces operating in Ukraine, and Iranian proxy organizations throughout the Middle East and Africa. Pentagon procurement officials are conducting emergency reviews of every major tank contract. The systematic failure of American-supplied armored vehicles represents either fundamental design problems that contractors concealed during development or comprehensive intelligence failures that allowed enemies to develop countermeasures without detection by American surveillance systems. Israeli military doctrine that emphasized armored superiority and rapid mechanized operations is being abandoned. Tanks that were supposed to provide battlefield dominance have proven to be expensive targets that enemies can systematically destroy using weapons that cost fractions of what armored vehicles cost to develop, manufacture, and deploy. The global arms market implications are significant. Countries that purchased American tank technology are demanding refunds, canceling future orders, and seeking alternative weapon systems after witnessing the failure of American armored vehicles against relatively simple enemy countermeasures that any competent military force can develop and deploy. Congressional oversight committees are preparing investigations into defense contractor accountability. Companies that received hundreds of billions in taxpayer funding for tank development delivered vehicles that provide no protection against realistic enemy threats while concealing known vulnerabilities that enemies could exploit to achieve systematic destruction of American armor. The weapons technology that Hamas used to systematically destroy Israeli Merkava tanks represents a revolution in military engineering. It proves expensive American armor provides no protection against enemies who understand how to exploit fundamental design flaws using weapon systems that cost less than luxury cars while achieving destruction rates that exceed anything seen in modern warfare history. Hamas tank killer teams used commercially available drones modified with shaped, charge warheads that cost approximately $500 each to destroy Merkava tanks worth $4.5 million, achieving cost-exchange ratios of nearly 10,000 to 1. This makes traditional military economics obsolete when enemies understand how to turn American technological complexity into exploitable vulnerabilities. The tactical coordination that enabled this tank massacre includes artificial intelligence targeting systems that automatically identify weak points in tank armor, coordinate multiple simultaneous attacks against individual vehicles, and adapt attack patterns in real time based on defensive responses, creating dynamic battlefield capabilities that exceed anything available to most national militaries. Iranian-supplied weapon systems include advanced anti-tank guided missiles, rocket-propelled grenades with tandem warheads, and improvised explosive devices designed to exploit Merkava tank vulnerabilities that Iranian military engineers identified through systematic analysis of Israeli tank operations and American armored vehicle design principles. The shaped charge technology that proved so devastating against Israeli armor uses advanced metallurgy, precision manufacturing, and chemical explosives that create focused jets of molten metal capable of penetrating any known armor system regardless of thickness or composition, making traditional tank protection obsolete against enemies who understand explosive physics. Russian technical assistance provided Hamas forces with electronic warfare capabilities that jam Israeli tank communications, disable targeting systems, and disrupt coordination between armored units, creating isolated targets that Hamas anti-tank teams could engage systematically without facing coordinated defensive responses from Israeli tank formations. Chinese military advisors contributed advanced materials science that allows manufacture of penetrating warheads using commercial components, precision guidance systems built from smartphone technology, and targeting algorithms that automatically identify optimal impact points for maximum armor penetration and crew casualties. The manufacturing capabilities that Hamas developed for anti-tank weapons include underground production facilities, quality control procedures, and inventory management systems that ensure sustained anti-tank operations using locally manufactured weapons that international sanctions cannot restrict or intelligence agencies cannot monitor effectively. Tunnel warfare integration allows Hamas anti-tank teams to appear anywhere on the battlefield without warning, engage Israeli tanks from optimal positions, and disappear before Israeli forces can respond, creating tactical advantages that neutralize Israeli technological superiority through superior positioning and timing coordination. The training programs that transformed Hamas fighters into professional anti-tank specialists include comprehensive education in tank vulnerabilities, weapons employment procedures, tactical coordination protocols, and survival techniques that create indigenous military capabilities exceeding those of most conventional military forces. Trophy active protection systems that were supposed to make Israeli tanks invulnerable to anti-tank weapons proved inadequate against coordinated attacks that overwhelm defensive capabilities, exploit system limitations, and use attack patterns that trophy designers never anticipated during development testing. Advanced targeting procedures that Hamas developed allow simultaneous attacks against multiple tanks from different directions using coordinated timing that prevents defensive systems from responding effectively while ensuring maximum destruction with minimum weapons expenditure and personnel exposure. The psychological warfare component includes systematic destruction of command tanks, recovery vehicles, and support equipment that creates panic among Israeli tank crews, while demonstrating Hamas' capability to identify and prioritize high-value targets that maximize tactical and psychological impact. Quality control standards that ensure weapon reliability use testing procedures, performance verification, and systematic evaluation that guarantee consistent results against armored targets while minimizing weapon failures that could compromise anti-tank team safety during combat operations. Innovation processes that encourage creative problem-solving among Hamas technical teams produce continuous improvements in anti-tank weapons design, manufacturing efficiency, and tactical employment that create evolutionary capabilities that tank designers cannot predict or counter through defensive modifications. The supply chain security that protects Hamas anti-tank operations uses decentralized procurement, multiple supplier relationships, and compartmentalized manufacturing that prevents Israeli intelligence from disrupting weapons production through targeted attacks on critical facilities or key personnel. Technical documentation that Iranian advisors provided includes detailed specifications for tank vulnerabilities, optimal attack procedures, safety protocols, and maintenance requirements that ensure sustained anti-tank capabilities regardless of personnel turnover or operational pressures. Reverse engineering capabilities allow systematic analysis of captured Israeli tank components to understand design principles, identify additional vulnerabilities, and develop improved countermeasures that exploit weaknesses that original designers never considered during development processes. The integration of commercial technology with military applications creates anti-tank capabilities using civilian components that cannot be restricted through military sanctions while providing performance that exceeds purpose. Built military systems through creative engineering and innovative applications. Coordinated logistics support ensures continuous supply of anti-tank weapons, replacement components, and technical support that maintains operational capability during extended combat operations without dependence on external suppliers that enemies can target through military or diplomatic pressure. Electronic warfare integration includes communication security, radar jamming, and navigation disruption that protects anti-tank teams while simultaneously degrading Israeli tank effectiveness through technological interference that exploits reliance on electronic systems for operational coordination. The scalability of Hamas anti-tank capabilities allows rapid expansion of operations to meet tactical requirements without compromising effectiveness or survivability, using modular training programs, standardized weapons procedures, and flexible deployment methods that adapt to changing battlefield conditions. Future development trajectories include autonomous anti-tank systems, artificial intelligence applications, and advanced materials research that will produce next-generation capabilities designed specifically to counter American tank improvements and defensive countermeasures that Pentagon planners are desperately trying to develop. The exportability of Hamas anti-tank innovations means that successful tactics, weapons designs, and training procedures will be shared with allied organizations throughout the Middle East, creating regional capabilities that threaten American and Israeli armored forces wherever they operate. Long-term strategic implications include permanent alteration of armored warfare doctrine, because traditional tank advantages have been systematically neutralized through innovative applications of available technology that any motivated adversary can develop and deploy against expensive American armored systems. The technological revolution that Hamas achieved proves that asymmetric warfare capabilities can exceed conventional military advantages through creative engineering, systematic analysis, and innovative tactical applications that turn expensive American military investments into exploitable vulnerabilities that enemies can systematically target and destroy. The systematic intelligence failures that enabled Hamas to achieve complete tactical surprise while simultaneously exploiting fundamental design flaws in Israeli tank systems represent a comprehensive breakdown of American and Israeli military planning. Expensive intelligence networks provide no protection against enemies who understand how to operate below the detection thresholds of advanced surveillance systems. Israeli military intelligence spent billions of dollars on surveillance technology, human intelligence networks, and electronic monitoring systems that failed to detect Hamas anti-tank weapons development. Tactical training programs and operational preparations that transformed Gaza into a dangerous anti-armor battlefield. The design philosophy that made Merkava tanks vulnerable to systematic destruction prioritized protection against conventional anti-tank weapons rather than addressing asymmetric threats that Hamas developed specifically to exploit assumptions built into American tank design principles that emphasized technological complexity over fundamental survivability. American tank doctrine that influenced Israeli armored vehicle development assumes that technological superiority provides automatic battlefield advantages, ignoring asymmetric warfare principles that allow determined enemies to neutralize expensive systems using creative tactics and innovative weapons that exploit design assumptions rather than competing with American technology. Crew survival systems that were supposed to protect Israeli tank personnel proved inadequate when Hamas attacks created internal explosions, toxic gas exposure, and structural damage that overwhelmed safety features designed for conventional warfare scenarios, rather than the coordinated precision attacks that Hamas developed through systematic study of tank vulnerabilities. The engine-forward design that supposedly provided additional crew protection actually created larger target signatures, reduced maneuverability in urban environments, and concentrated critical systems in ways that allowed single Hamas weapons to achieve severe kills through precise targeting of vulnerable points that Israeli designers never adequately protected. Communication systems that Israeli tank crews depended on for coordination and tactical awareness proved vulnerable to Hamas electronic warfare capabilities that jammed radio frequencies, disrupted data links, and isolated individual tanks from mutual support that traditional tank doctrine considers essential for survival. Situational awareness technology, including advanced optics, night vision systems, and battlefield management computers, provided no advantages against Hamas fighters who understood Israeli sensor limitations and developed tactics that exploited blind spots, detection thresholds, and response delays built into complex electronic systems. The Trophy Active Protection System that Israeli military leaders promoted as revolutionary tank defense technology failed severely against Hamas coordinated attacks that overwhelmed system capabilities, exploited software limitations, and used attack patterns that system designers never tested during development processes. Maintenance and logistics vulnerabilities that Hamas systematically targeted include fuel supplies, ammunition storage recovery vehicles, and repair facilities that proved impossible to protect against enemies who understood Israeli operational procedures and developed specific tactics for disrupting armored unit sustainability. Training deficiencies among Israeli tank crews became apparent when combat operations revealed that personnel were not prepared for asymmetric warfare scenarios, urban combat conditions, or coordinated attacks that differed from conventional warfare training that emphasized technological advantages over tactical adaptability. Intelligence collection priorities that focused on conventional military threats ignored asymmetric warfare development, innovative tactical training, and weapons technology advancement that Hamas conducted openly, while Israeli surveillance systems concentrated on traditional indicators that missed revolutionary changes in enemy capabilities. The tactical doctrine that emphasized rapid armored advances and technological shock effects proved inappropriate for combat environments where enemies possessed comprehensive intelligence about Israeli capabilities while maintaining tactical flexibility that allowed adaptation to Israeli responses. Risk assessment procedures that approved tank deployments in Gaza failed to account for enemy capabilities that exceeded intelligence estimates, tactical innovations that neutralized Israeli advantages, and operational environments that favored defenders over expensive armored systems designed for open terrain warfare. Quality assurance testing that approved Merkava tank systems for operational deployment used evaluation criteria based on conventional warfare scenarios rather than asymmetric threats that Hamas specifically developed to exploit assumptions built into American and Israeli tank design philosophy. The industrial base that produced Israeli tank systems prioritized meeting specifications and contract requirements rather than addressing realistic operational threats, creating expensive systems optimized for theoretical scenarios rather than actual combat conditions that Hamas systematically exploited. Interoperability standards that connected Israeli tanks with American military systems created additional vulnerabilities that Hamas electronic warfare capabilities could exploit through shared communication protocols, standardized equipment interfaces, and coordinated operational procedures. The technological complexity that Israeli engineers built into advanced tank systems created multiple failure points that Hamas attacks could exploit simultaneously, overwhelming repair capabilities while creating cascading system failures that traditional damage control procedures could not address effectively. Operational security failures allowed Hamas intelligence collection about Israeli tank capabilities, deployment patterns, and tactical procedures that provided comprehensive targeting information, while Israeli counterintelligence failed to detect systematic enemy surveillance and intelligence gathering operations. The strategic planning that deployed expensive tank systems in environments favorable to asymmetric warfare ignored lessons learned from previous conflicts while overestimating Israeli technological advantages and underestimating enemy adaptation capabilities that Hamas demonstrated through systematic destruction of advanced armored systems. Future implications include complete revision of American tank development priorities, fundamental changes in armored warfare doctrine, an acknowledgement that expensive military technology provides no advantages against enemies who understand how to exploit design assumptions rather than competing with American industrial capabilities. Congressional investigations into tank program failures will examine defense contractor accountability, procurement procedures, and testing standards that approved systems providing no protection against realistic threats, while consuming hundreds of billions in taxpayer funding for capabilities that enemies systematically defeated. The global military community is conducting emergency reviews of tank warfare doctrine, armored vehicle design principles, and operational procedures that proved inadequate against asymmetric threats that any motivated adversary can develop, using Hamas tactical innovations as proven templates for defeating expensive American armored systems. The economic implications of Hamas systematically destroying over 200 Israeli tanks worth nearly $1 billion using weapons that cost less than $100,000 total represents a severe failure of military economics. It proves that expensive American defense systems create unsustainable financial vulnerabilities that enemies can exploit to bankrupt military budgets through mathematical precision rather than battlefield superiority. The cost exchange calculations that make this tank massacre so devastating for Israeli and American defense budgets reveal that Hamas spent approximately $50,000 on weapons, equipment, and operational costs to destroy armored vehicles worth over $1 billion, creating cost ratios of 20,000 to 1 that make sustained armored operations economically impossible when enemies understand how to force defenders into financially unsustainable positions. Israeli defense spending that prioritized expensive technological solutions over cost-effective military capabilities created exactly the vulnerabilities that Hamas systematically exploited. Complex, expensive systems require massive maintenance costs, extensive training programs, and continuous upgrades that consume defense budgets while providing no actual protection against determined enemies who study system weaknesses. American taxpayer burden for replacing destroyed Israeli armor includes not just the immediate costs of new tank production, but comprehensive program expenses for research and development, manufacturing infrastructure, training systems, and logistics support that could exceed $10 billion over the next 5 years while providing no guarantee of improved performance against proven enemy countermeasures. Defense contractor profit margins from Israeli tank losses include immediate replacement orders worth billions of dollars, emergency upgrade contracts for surviving systems, and long-term development programs for next-generation armor that may prove equally vulnerable to enemy innovations, creating perverse economic incentives where contractor revenues increase when their products fail operationally. The global arms market disruption caused by systematic Israeli tank failures includes canceled orders from international customers, demand for contract modifications from existing purchasers, and competitive advantages for alternative suppliers who can offer effective systems at lower costs than American contractors whose products have proven inadequate against realistic threats. Insurance and liability implications for defense contractors whose tank systems failed so severely may include warranty claims, performance guarantees, and potential lawsuits from customers who purchased systems that provided no protection against enemy capabilities that contractors should have anticipated during design and testing processes. Israeli military budget reallocation requirements include emergency funding for tank replacement, accelerated development of alternative systems, and comprehensive revision of procurement priorities that shift resources away from expensive technological solutions toward cost-effective capabilities that provide actual protection against proven enemy tactics. The asymmetric economics that Hamas demonstrated show how motivated adversaries can achieve strategic objectives through financial attrition rather than military superiority, forcing expensive military organizations to spend massive resources on defensive responses that exceed attacking costs by ratios that no defense budget can sustain indefinitely. American defense industry accountability issues include congressional investigations into contractor performance, procurement oversight failures, and quality assurance procedures that approved expensive systems providing no protection against threats that competent analysis should have identified during development and testing processes. Federal budget implications include emergency appropriations for Israeli military aid, increased defense spending for American tank programs, and potential tax increases or deficit spending required to fund military system replacement and development programs that may prove equally ineffective against innovative enemy countermeasures. The opportunity costs of failed tank investments include alternative military capabilities that could have been developed with resources wasted on ineffective armored systems, social programs that were underfunded while defense contractors received billions for products that enemies systematically destroyed, and infrastructure investments that were postponed to fund military systems that provided no actual security benefits. International economic implications include reduced confidence in American military technology exports, decreased demand for expensive defense systems that enemies can defeat using cheap countermeasures, and potential shifts in global arms trade toward suppliers who offer cost-effective solutions rather than expensive systems that fail operationally. Stock market impacts include declining values for defense contractor shares as investors recognize that expensive military systems provide poor returns when enemies can systematically defeat them using innovative tactics, while alternative investment opportunities in civilian technology may provide better long-term growth prospects than military contractors whose products fail repeatedly. Research and development cost recovery becomes impossible when expensive military systems are systematically destroyed before they can demonstrate operational value, creating sunk costs that cannot be amortized through normal product life cycles, while simultaneously requiring additional investment in replacement systems that may prove equally vulnerable. The manufacturing capacity implications include retooling production lines for tank replacement, training workers for accelerated production schedules, and maintaining industrial base capabilities for systems that enemies can systematically defeat, creating economic inefficiencies that reduce overall industrial competitiveness. Employment effects in defense industries include temporary increases in manufacturing jobs for replacement systems offset by long-term job losses if international customers cancel orders for ineffective American military technology, creating economic disruption in communities dependent on defense contractor employment. Regional economic impacts include reduced economic activity in areas dependent on military bases that operate expensive systems enemies can systematically destroy, decreased tax revenues from defense contractor operations that lose international market share, and potential industrial base erosion as production shifts to more effective alternative systems. The long-term economic consequences include permanent erosion of American defense industry competitiveness as international customers recognize that expensive American systems provide poor value compared to alternatives, leading to reduced market share and decreased revenues for American defense contractors. Congressional budget oversight will examine whether defense appropriations provided value for taxpayers who funded expensive systems that enemies systematically defeated, potentially leading to reduced defense spending authorization and increased oversight of contractor performance and accountability. Pension fund implications include reduced returns for retirement accounts invested in defense contractor stocks that lose value when their products fail operationally, affecting retirement security for millions of Americans whose financial planning assumed continued growth in defense industry investments. The ripple effects throughout the American economy include reduced confidence in high technology manufacturing, decreased investment in research and development programs that produce expensive systems enemies can defeat, and potential shifts in economic priorities towards sectors that provide better returns on investment than military technology. Future procurement decisions will emphasize cost effectiveness over technological complexity as military planners recognize that expensive systems create vulnerabilities that enemies can exploit through economic warfare, rather than attempting to American technological capabilities through conventional military competition. The systematic destruction of Israeli tank forces by Hamas has triggered a comprehensive revolution in armored warfare doctrine. Classified Pentagon planning documents obtained through defense contractor sources reveal that American military leaders are privately acknowledging that traditional tank warfare is obsolete, while desperately attempting to develop new approaches that address enemy capabilities, rather than assuming technological superiority provides automatic battlefield advantages. Operation Steel Phoenix, the Pentagon's emergency response to Israeli tank losses, includes immediate deployment of American military advisors to analyze Hamas tactics, comprehensive revision of American tank development priorities, and accelerated research programs for next-generation armored systems that may cost over $50 billion, while providing no guarantee of effectiveness against enemies who study American capabilities. American tank crews deployed worldwide are receiving emergency tactical training based on Hamas innovations because Pentagon planners recognize that identical tactics will be used against American armor in future conflicts, requiring fundamental changes in operational procedures, defensive measures, and coordination protocols that American tank doctrine never anticipated. The Abrams tank replacement program that Congress approved before Israeli tank losses is being redesigned because existing development priorities focused on conventional warfare scenarios rather than asymmetric threats that Hamas proved can systematically defeat expensive armored systems using creative tactics and innovative weapons. NATO alliance armored warfare doctrine is undergoing emergency revision because European allies recognize that their expensive tank systems are equally vulnerable to Hamas-style tactics, forcing comprehensive changes in military planning, procurement priorities, and operational procedures throughout the Western military alliance. Chinese military planners are incorporating Hamas anti-tank innovations into comprehensive strategies for defeating American armored forces during potential Taiwan conflict scenarios, giving China detailed knowledge of American tank vulnerabilities while providing proven methods for systematic destruction of expensive American military systems. Russian military forces operating in Ukraine are already implementing Hamas tactical innovations against Western-supplied armor, proving that successful anti-tank methods spread rapidly among American enemies while creating immediate threats to American allies who depend on armored systems for battlefield effectiveness. Defense contractor research and development programs are shifting focus from expensive technological solutions toward cost-effective systems that acknowledge enemy capabilities, rather than assuming American technological superiority provides protection against determined adversaries who understand how to exploit American design assumptions. Congressional oversight of tank programs will examine whether defense contractors deliberately concealed known vulnerabilities during development processes, potentially leading to criminal investigations, contract cancellations, and demands for refunding taxpayer money spent on ineffective systems that provide no protection against realistic threats. American military academy curricula are being revised to emphasize asymmetric warfare principles, rather than conventional military doctrine that assumes technological advantages provide battlefield superiority, requiring fundamental changes in officer education and strategic planning that acknowledge enemy innovation capabilities. International arms sales that previously generated billions in revenue for American defense contractors are declining as potential customers recognize that expensive American systems provide poor value against enemies who can systematically defeat them using Hamas, proven tactics, and innovative countermeasures. The psychological impact on American tank crews includes recognition that their expensive training and advanced equipment provide no protection against enemies who understand American capabilities better than American military planners understand enemy innovations, creating morale problems that undermine military effectiveness worldwide. Future conflict scenarios that Pentagon war games are analyzing assume that American enemies will use Hamas tactics against American armored forces, requiring military responses that current American capabilities cannot provide while demanding resources that American defense budgets cannot sustain. Allied military cooperation agreements are being revised as partner nations question the effectiveness of American military technology and seek alternative security arrangements that provide actual protection rather than expensive systems that enemies can systematically defeat using proven methods. The global implications include permanent changes in military balance as smaller nations recognize that expensive military systems provide no advantages against enemies who understand how to exploit technological complexity through creative tactics and innovative weapons development. American families need to understand that defense spending increases required for tank program revision will cost hundreds of billions in taxpayer money, while providing no guarantee of improved military effectiveness against enemies who study American capabilities and develop appropriate countermeasures. Subscribe to this channel immediately because mainstream media outlets will not provide honest analysis of military failures that threaten defense contractor profits. You deserve to understand how badly your tax dollars have been wasted on military systems that provide no actual protection against determined enemies. Stay informed through independent sources because government officials and defense contractors are systematically concealing the true extent of military technology failures while requesting massive increases in defense spending for replacement systems that may prove equally ineffective against enemy innovations. Share this information because American taxpayers deserve accountability from defense contractors who received hundreds of billions for systems that enemies systematically defeated. Only informed citizens can demand realistic solutions rather than expensive technological complexity that creates exploitable vulnerabilities. The armored graveyard in Gaza represents more than military equipment losses. It symbolizes the failure of American military doctrine that assumed technological superiority guarantees battlefield success while ignoring enemy capabilities to innovate, adapt, and overcome through determination and creative tactical applications of available resources.